Welcome back to Little Steps, Big Gains and our series, Let's Talk Incontinence. Now, in video 1, we introduced the series and we talked about what is the pelvic floor and what is incontinence. And now we're progressing to talk about bowel incontinence, because if we have bowel and bladder incontinence, it is often recommended to address that bowel incontinence first. So that is what we're going to do here. We're going to talk a little bit more about it, discuss some possible treatment strategies that might help you. Another name for bowel incontinence is fecal incontinence. And this is where we pass stool unexpectedly. It's usually a sign of an underlying medical condition, and therefore it shouldn't be ignored, but you should consult with your medical provider and work with them on this. There are a few things that need to be present in order to have good bowel control, and a few of them include down at the bottom of our intestines, there's our rectum, and it needs to be able to stretch to hold our stool in. We need sensation down there to send signals to the brain. We then need the rectum and the anus, which are the muscles that control holding everything in. We need them to work properly together. We need the anus strong, and then we need the physical capacity and capability to make it to the bathroom on time. And the reason I share some of those things is to show the complexity of why we need to be consulting with our medical provider first and foremost. But here's some other treatment ideas. Now, when you sit down with your medical provider, they might break down options like medications or surgical management. These are some behavioral modifications that maybe you can discuss with them. I am going to put this list in the description, kind of list it here, and then go through each one individually. So first, we want to make sure we have adequate water intake. 2, avoid bowel irritants. 3, increase our fiber intake. 4, maybe pelvic floor strengthening or exercises. 5, utilize what's called the Gastrocolic Reflex, along with a bowel training program. And then 6, possibly modifying our position on the toilets. Let me go through each one of these. Number 1, maintain adequate water intake. This is so important and essential because we need water for proper stool consistency. When we don't take enough water in, then it's going to prioritize the water you do take in and send it to the brain and the organs so that the stool doesn't get the proper consistency and it's harder to pass. Not only that, but this might help with bladder incontinence because a lot of times people don't take in enough water because of going to the bathroom all the time. But then what this does is it concentrates the urine, which then can irritate the bladder lining and makes it worse. So number 1, maintain adequate water intake. Number 2, avoid bowel irritants. Now, this sounds so simple, but we often don't think about the triggers that happened ahead of time before our episode. I have a list down below. You can Google common bowel irritants. See if there's a pattern there for you, because that might be a simple modification that could help. Number 3, increase our fiber intake. You may have heard that before, but why? Well, fiber bulks up our stool. And with the more bulk in it, then the intestines, that when it goes down our intestinal tract, the intestines have more to push to help it pass easier. Now, this is kind of tricky because too much fiber actually might give us more gas and cramping, but we absolutely need it to help pass our stool. So an intervention, what I do here is I help my patients make a fiber station. So we sit down and we go over foods that are high in fiber, and I help them pick out ones that they enjoy. We then create a station in their house where they can grab all these items that they went shopping for, put them in one place, or the list, because that might include something in the refrigerator. At that point, they need to visit that fiber station throughout the day to make sure their intake of fiber is adequate. Number 4, pelvic floor strengthening exercises. Talk to your doctor to see if this is appropriate for you. The research usually supports it because it can strengthen the muscles of the rectum and the anus to help pass that stool. A really great resource for this is pelvic floor physical therapy, where they can do biofeedback and make sure you're doing the exercises correctly. I do have a 30-day pelvic floor strengthening exercise program if your doctor feels that's appropriate for you. Number 5, try a bowel training schedule. Eating at the same time, getting on the toilet at the same time to improve that regularity. Now, something you might want to pair up to make this easier is utilizing what's called the gastrocolic reflex. It's a natural physiological response which can increase the contractions of the intestines after we eat a meal. So one way to do this would be to eat a meal, preferably with high fat contents. Drink a warm beverage. Walk around, move, try to do something physical for maybe 20 to 30 minutes, and then go to the toilet. And that might help. Number 6, possibly modifying your position on the toilet. The fancy name for this is Defecation posture modification. And basically, we're looking at something called the anal rectal angle. It's the angle between the anus and the rectum. And we want that open and straighter so that way the stool can pass easier. When this angle is more open and straighter, it can do 3 things. First off, it can reduce the amount of time it takes to defecate, which is a good thing, right? It can reduce the amount of strain it takes. And 3, it can improve complete evacuation of the bowels. So this is really important if we can open up that angle. And this is more open in a squatted position. And we can facilitate that in 2 ways, but first you need to consult with your physician, especially if you've had a recent hip replacement, because you don't want to break any hip precautions. You also need to have really good sitting balance for this. So this isn't for everybody, but this is a suggestion for some people. So in order to improve that squatted position or facilitate it, you can look into something called a squatty potty, or grabbing a stool and putting it under your feet, because now you're increasing that angle there by raising up your knees. The second thing you could possibly do is lean forward, hands on the knees, and bring your feet back. You really need good sitting balance for this, good safety. Don't go tumbling forward. That could possibly increase that anal rectal angle though. Now this is really tricky because as an occupational therapist, my goal is to help people be independent again, and that includes toileting. So one of the things I'm responsible for with admissions is modifying the room and modifying the bathroom to make it safe and customized for that person. And one of the things I do is I customize the height of the commode. And this is a double-edged sword because I want it to be high enough that my individuals can get up independently. But also I have to realize if it's too high to the point that it's unnecessarily high for that person, I'm closing up that anal rectal angle more. Something for this that would help is when I put their feet up on a stool. Of course, I stay in there with them for safety, but just a suggestion for other therapists out there, or if you're struggling with this as well. So there are other treatment options out there. These are just a few, but I highly, highly recommend you consult with your physician, first and foremost, your medical providers. Discuss options, maybe include some of these options with you. On top of that, I recommend maybe looking into pelvic floor therapy. They can sit down and design a custom program just for you. I do hope that you found this little video informative, educational, and possibly applicable and helpful for you. If you're hanging in there with me, we're going to now jump into bladder incontinence. Thank you for coming.